Hey guys, Chris here, Morgan Pipes. I was challenged by TheeDiabeticMan to talk about briar today. I'm actually going to go a little bit further, talk about a few other materials that are used in pipe making. But basically, Tom is putting forth this, I'm assuming it's going to be a series of multiple challenges. Well, it's a challenge for any of his viewers. And then also challenges towards guys like me. Jim DeShane already did a video talking about his drilling, his philosophy surrounding that, and how a couple of books by Rick Newcomb, In Search of Pipe Dreams, Still in Search of Pipe Dreams, Still in Search of Pipe Dreams? I think that's the name. I'm sorry if I mess that up. I have the book, that's the sad part. Have influenced the way that he does his drilling, as they did with me, believe it or not. But that's another story for another time. Go over to JD Smoking Pipes' channel and check out his video. Also check out The Diabetic Man, that's Thee, Diabetic Man, and check out his most recent videos. Very entertaining, very well spoken guy, and he's got an idea here that I think is pretty cool. It's good for us to think about this. Anyway, this will be a fairly lengthy video, so feel free to skip through. I'm going to try to edit it so I can put little titles at the bottom so you know what I'm talking about at that particular time, but that may not happen. I'm horrible with this stuff. So, first off, you wanted me to talk about briar. Now, keep in mind, throughout this whole process, listening to me, a lot of it is fact, but a lot of it is also my opinion of these materials. So if you disagree with me, put it down in the comments. If I screwed up something, maybe I misspoke, maybe I have the wrong information, put it down in the comments. No harm done. I won't be offended. Not that that matters to most of us anyway. But we'll start off with briar, which is Erica arborea, and it's the root ball of the white heath tree, grows in the Mediterranean, and essentially, I should have brought one down, but it essentially looks like could be anywhere from a grapefruit size to a basketball size, and that's that burl on the outside that you see. That's the skin of the root ball. So imagine this, and it's just a full sphere. Well, sometimes they're spheres, sometimes they're weird elongated shapes. It really just depends. It's a natural product. And you're more than likely going to be getting what they call a plateau briar piece. Now, if you can imagine, we'll call it, the globe, the Earth, and that outer section, pretty much like, let's call it the first 100 miles deep, or whatever you want to say. That's going to be your plateau sections. They're going to be more porous. They're going to be, because they are on the outside, they generally have lower inclusion rates, less cracking, but that is going to be your prime material. If you're either making a pipe, because it is easier to work with, or if you're smoking a pipe, you're going to want it to be plateau. The vast majority of pipes out there are not plateau. They're what are called ebouchon. Now, ebouchon is not bad. It's the same material. It's just closer to the center. The term has also been sort of misused over the years. It's been used to refer to inferior grade briar, which is not true. It's been used to refer to all briar blocks, as the briar block, as a noun. So it really depends on who you talk to and where you get your information. So there's that. Aside from that, you're going to find that ebouchon blocks are going to be a little denser. They're going to have a higher likelihood of inclusions, cracks. You got to imagine when this thing is growing, and it's weak essentially when it's starting out. There's not a whole lot of structure here. It's just a root. So if an animal came through and tried to dig it up, it's going to have damage to it. It's going to be softer at that point. As the root gets larger, it does have quite a bit more strength. So that could also be the reason. Once again, if you guys have a better description of it, put it down below. I'd love to hear it. But for the most part, as a pipe maker, artisanal pipe maker, um, if you're making pipes by hand, you're going to be wanting to buy plateau. You're going to get the best grain from it. It's going to be usually as vertical as you're going to get into the entire burl. Whereas plateau, you're going to get a little more mixed grain. There's a third type, and it's called, I call it crosscut. Crosscut is still plateau. It's just plateau that has been cut in a different fashion. So if you imagine the grains of this block being like your hair, kind of, or we'll call it like a forest. So you got a bunch of your grain lines coming up this way. Now, if you were to turn that on its side, the grain lines are going the same direction, it's just in a different orientation. And if you were to cut that block, you now have the tops of those trees, all the bird eyes in there. So that's where your blowfish blocks. A lot of people think that a blowfish is an ebuchon block, or maybe it's a plateau turn on its side. There is a name for that, but you're generally going to have the same type of quality of material whether you order a crosscut or a plateau. An ebuchon is a totally different thing. Sometimes they call it bag briar. So there's a lot of information here, and I'm trying to get it out as easily as I can. You're also going to have grades. So when this material is processed from mills such as, let's see, there's Mimo, the biggest, arguably the best mill. Mimo's a great guy. He's been doing this for a very long time, and he has a very, very clean quality product. There is Makis in Greece. Excellent product as well. Slightly different material, slightly different process. Every mill is going to have their own way of doing things, just like every pipe maker is going to have their own way of doing things. None of them are really wrong until they're wrong, and you'll know when you see bad briar. It's going to be pink. It's going to be hard to cut. It's going to burn when you try to cut it. It's going to dull your tools faster. It's going to have flaws in it. It's pretty obvious when you look at material. Briar is something that you want to be as light as possible. I mean, lightweight, but also light color. And that's going to show the clarity. It's going to show that there isn't any more tannins or saps involved inside the grain. So when briar is brought in, it's generally harvested and then delivered to a mill. I'm not sure how anyone else does it, but I know in Italy it's harvested by groups of people that harvest it. They bring it to the mill. It is watered, kept alive. It is an evergreen, so you can keep watering it, and the burl just kind of chills out in a dark place, and it's happy and healthy and alive. It's split, inspected, cut further into blocks by hand, which is the scariest thing I could possibly think of, but more often than not, a lot of these guys still have all their fingers. So, so then it's cut, it's sorted, it's boiled in water. Some guys have their own proprietary ways of doing that. I was not privy to the mills that I deal with. I was not privy to that information. But as I understand it, water. And then dried. And generally the offcuts from the wood that was maybe done 6 to 8 months ago, they are burned for fuel to create heat in the workshop. It does get cold in the Mediterranean region. And it just, you keep the briar drying. After about 6 months, the briar is usually ready to use. But they could have blocks in there that are as old as 20 years. So that's a whole other thing, this whole 100-year-old briar thing. That's a totally different topic. I'm not going to touch on that today. But after the briar is dried, it goes through a secondary grading process. And I'm sure it's graded more often than that throughout the process. But it's gone through based on grain, based on the cleanliness of the wood. If there's little pits, maybe there's a crack in this one, recut. And they are graded based on that. Every mill has their own type of grading system, and there's various names that are used to grade. So you've got what I would call your first quality plateaus and crosscuts. And those are something like like this. And this one's from Mimo. And he stamps 1, 2, and 3 on his blocks. So you'd be looking at grain that is more vertically oriented. And this one's hard to tell actually because it's kind of a funny block. Personally, I like to see that the eyes are going to be very small and defined. And that's present on a lot of these plateau blocks. And then the grain orientation and the cleanliness, that's mainly what you're using to grade it. Grade 2, maybe it has a couple flecks in it, you know, some small pits, stuff like that. It might be a sandblastable block, it might be a smooth block, it's kind of a crapshoot, depends. And then you have your third quality, which with Mimo's mill is used to signify blast grade, which is not necessarily an indication of the quality of the briar, as it is the indication of the softness of the briar in relation to the grain. So on those, I'm not sure if I have one of those here. Yep, I got one. You might be able to see what would end up being the ring grain. You can see the waves that go through it. Now, for every grain, for every summer growth, you have a winter growth. Winter growth is going to be hard and dense. Summer growth is going to be quick and larger. Now, when you sandblast, and whether you're just sandblasting lightly, or you go on ultra craggy, JT Cook style, you're still going to be following those lines. That's what you end up seeing, and that's just the growth and the density that that grain is producing in its lifetime. And it goes for the same with any other wood. I mean, you go redwood, oak, fir, they all have that definition. The density varies, and the sandblasting quality would vary as well. But that's basically where your ring grain's coming from. This block is as clean as a first grade block, in my opinion. The grain is fantastic, straight up and down. But on this particular block, the rings are larger. It's a much lighter weight block for the size. But it doesn't mean that you could finish it smooth. If you had finished this block smooth, you generally would just see those rings. You wouldn't see a whole lot of the vertical grain. And I don't have a ton of information on that, but I'm sure you can look it up. And then you have your poor quality bag briar, stuff that would go to pipes that are generally lacquered, heavily shellacked, heavily stained, probably heavily sandblasted, and bowl coated. And it doesn't make them bad pipes, it just makes the blocks kind of ugly. Stuff that you do want to cover up, and a lot of the cheaper quality pipes will do that. Your pipes that are generally found as basket pipes, or much lower quality pipes. A lot of stuff in other countries. Even some Chinese pipes. You go on Amazon, you find a briar pipe, which is sometimes briar, and it's like red, and it looks like it's painted. That's the kind of stuff that is utilizing that kind of briar. And it's very cheap. Some of it can turn out to be great smoking pipes. Some of it you'll know right off the bat if it's a hot smoker. I personally am of firm belief that you should leave the outside of the briar open to breathe. Whether you're using a carnauba wax, you're leaving it raw, you're using an oil cure, it should never be shellacked. And I know that's a hot word. That's something that people get kind of fired up about, but that's my personal opinion. I've seen a lot of beautiful pipes that do have shellac on them, but it's just not my way. I don't choose to do it that way. So, next step would be, I guess, talking about meerschaum. If you guys want to know more about any of these topics, I can do smaller videos based on it. I just want to keep this under 20 minutes. So you've got meerschaum. Meerschaum is a funny material. It's a magnesium silicate, and it's found mainly in Turkey. It's also found in Africa. We even have meerschaum in the States. In fact, I know a guy that used to live right near what is now a national park, and it had a meerschaum mine. It was very soft, so the mine ended up not producing. The meerschaum itself was very soft. African meerschaum is generally a darker color. It has more inclusions. It's generally a little heavier than Turkish meerschaum, but it's some people like it. and other people, are purists and they want only Turkish meerschaum. So I don't have any African meerschaum here. I'm trying to think. I might have one. Might have one calabash that has a African meerschaum bowl. But I don't know where it is. So if I find it, I'll put it up. I'll do another video. But meerschaum generally is purchased in one format. If you can get it, it is, keep in mind, it is illegal to export from Turkey. But if you can get it, it is legal to import into the U.S. So it's kind of a weird, it's like a national treasure thing. We don't export as Americans certain things out of the country. They don't export certain things out of their country, but if you were to receive it, you're not going to jail for it. Most of the customs agents don't even know what it is, so it's internally policed. So you're generally going to find meerschaum like this. If you can get it, it's going to come in lump form. These are mined. It's a mineral. And it's going to come generally wet. I know Steve Norse has some in from time to time. It's great quality stuff. I made a pipe with it 2 years ago. This actually came from him a long time ago. And, it's excellent quality. It's very lightweight. It's very white. There's another format that I recently discovered I want to say 2 years ago, year and a half ago, in dealing with yours truly, TheeDiabeticMan. When he was working at Yuli's, we're kind of treasure hunters. We're historical type people. We like, discovering new things that haven't been seen in a while. And he mentioned to me that Ed Andrew, who used to be employed by Yuli's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, he was back in the 70s on, they would be bringing in meerschaum from Turkey. Back at that time, the deposits, now considering the deposits are roughly this size, some are a little bigger, some are a little smaller nowadays, you're dealing with deposits that are significantly bigger. And you can cut those deposits down into smaller blocks. And in a normal phrasing operation, you would be, you would have your block of briar and it would be in block form. And you would need that for the machines to clamp on and do their work. Now, with this meerschaum, it is in block form. It is meerschaum. It's definitely not as white as this, but it's also sat in a basement for the past 60 years. Smells just like it. Has that meerschaum smell. When you cut it up, it has that nice, white, clean appearance. I'll show you one of the pipes that I did a couple years ago. Actually, it might have been about a year ago. And this is what you're left with. So you have these almost grain lines of mineral deposits. And I'll be honest, I was surprised. I kept thinking it was African meerschaum, but Ed Andrew, who is a legend in our community, he told us, man, it came from a mine in Turkey. So, Turkish meerschaum. It's great stuff. I actually do sell it, but it is pricey. It's very expensive. It was expensive for me to get it from Yuli's. There was a very limited amount, and it's probably the only meerschaum that you will ever find in block form now. It's my understanding that they just didn't end up using it. So there's that. That's meerschaum, basically. I don't know a ton about it. If there's someone that knows more, feel free to add on. You've got mortar. Mortar's a great material. It is harder than hell on your tools, but it looks beautiful when it's done. It's generally sandblasted, although there's a lot of guys that do it smooth, if you have the patience to sand it. But in sandblasted format, it looks really cool. The grain comes out. Mortar is a bog oak. It's generally comes from a tree that fell of natural causes, and then over many, many thousands, 10,000s of years, it slowly became mineralized and it darkens, and they're only found in boggy areas. So your best mortar is coming from France and the UK, Ireland, Scotland, England. That's the best stuff. Problem is, you can't export it. It is 100% illegal to export from bog oak from the UK or France. Trust me, I've tried to get it, and Trevor Talbert is way more highly versed on this subject than I am, as he did live in France, and he has used French mortar. So, if you're watching, Trevor, feel free to comment. We would love to hear some information on that. What else? If you can get it, and I've gotten quite a bit of it, it's not cheap. It is some beautiful stuff. They even, plane it and sand it and make it all beautiful, even though I'm going to mess it up. I get mine from Poland, and I believe they have some in Ukraine. So Eastern Europe is going to have probably the only stuff that you can get when it comes to mortar. And you can get it dated, you can get it not dated, you can get it blonde, so it's almost the color of briar. You can get it really, really black. This is almost a in-between color. It's sort of a grayish black. I have some pieces that are like midnight black, but it's a fun material. It's just kind of a pain in the ass to work with. Catlinite is another cool one. This is what is known as pipestone. And catlinite is highly prized by Native Americans. It is considered sacred. It is very difficult to get your hands on. You can't really buy it online. Sometimes you'll see blocks of it pop up on eBay. But it is considered to be a very sacred material for making traditional calumets. I think I pronounced that right. Yeah. It's a very heavy, very hard to work with material. I still haven't made a catlinite pipe, but I have quite a few blocks here. It's cool stuff, but I gotta say, man, it's like a brick of lead, and it's hard, and it doesn't soften up like meerschaum. Being a hydrated magnesium silicate, this is a full-on rock. It doesn't soften with water. You've got strawberry briar. Now, strawberry briar, which is also known as strawberry wood in the trade, is actually a form of madrone. You would know it in the U.S. as madrone. They call it strawberry wood because it produces these little red berries. They are edible. They're pretty sour, but they're consumed as like a refreshing drink. How we would use like raspberries in like a raspberry soda. Kind of falls along the same lines as like a cashew apple. They're not something that are commercially viable, but in the countries where they exist, they're used. And they're actually probably equally as sour. Strawberry wood is known for its blasting utility. You're going to get really wild grain. You're going to get a lot of cool, real deep blasting. This is a strawberry wood pipe. This isn't the deepest blast, but this is from my arbutus line. Strawberry wood is also known traditionally as arbutus. That's sort of your scientific name for it. But there's all kinds of interesting grain patterns that are not present on briar like they are in strawberry wood or arbutus. But it's just a different material. Some say it's softer. Some don't want to smoke it because they say, oh, maybe it might burn out a little more. It is definitely not as dense as briar, but it is close to the durability. It's not like you're smoking out of a pine pipe or something. It's not going to burst into flames. It is a very durable material. I think it tastes sweeter. It has a different taste. It's sort of like a more nutty, sweeter flavor. But it's a fun material. It's very lightweight for its size, and I love working with it, because you get those really cool grain patterns. And I guess that brings us to olive wood. There are other woods, all kinds of fruit woods. Olive wood tends to be the most traditionally used, mainly in Italy. It's very hard. Very hard. It smells fantastic. It's extremely hard to stabilize. That's the biggest problem with olive wood that I find, is that it is very susceptible to cracking if you don't take care of it. If you have it in an area where it's not temperature controlled, it does crack, over time. But it's a fun material. You know, it's you get all these beautiful wispy grains and stuff. It smells super cool when you're making it. If you don't have an allergy to it, there's a lot of guys that are really allergic to this stuff. Um, you can also go for you know, stuff from Jerusalem. They have olive wood in Jerusalem. It's very highly prized, especially for religious objects. If you are a craftsman of crucifixes or rings or any sort of jewelry like that, it does hold quite a bit of significance to those that you know, value its significance. You know, I think it's fantastic. It's very cool that you know, normally when you order olive wood from Jerusalem, they'll give you like a certificate certifying it's from the Holy Land and all that. So, kind of a neat thing. But olive wood is, again, like Morta, it's not quite as bad, but it's very hard on tools. You generally will come up with an amazingly smooth, high polish on these because of its density. But if you sandblast it, you have to pick the right pieces, but if you sandblast it, it gives the coolest finish. It's very hard to do and it takes forever. I've done it twice, and I kind of don't want to do it ever again. But you get this almost sandstone appearance to it, which I think is really beautiful. So these are my opinions and some facts on the materials that pipe makers use to make pipes. There are other materials. A lot of guys generally want to use fruit woods. I have tons of guys that ask me, hey, I want to start making pipes. I happen to have this apple tree in my backyard. Or I have a pear tree. And while I want to say briar is generally, it is more expensive, but it's generally hypoallergenic. I don't know too many people that are allergic to briar, whereas some people could be allergic to cherry, they could be allergic to almond. I mean, you got to be really careful about nut woods around people these days because you never know, they'll blow up or they'll start choking or whatever. I will say this though, generally stone fruit is good. So other than, you know, your apple, cherry, you know, your plums, your prunes, your I had a nectarine that I made a very rudimentary pipe out of, and it worked. It's just kind of weird sappy wood. Don't use anything that you're not 100% sure of. That's a good way to make someone very sick. I've heard guys over the years that they're using zebra wood. While I personally wouldn't do it, apparently it's been deemed safe. I would not recommend it. It's an exotic wood. There's guys that are using some other stuff. I forget where it's from. I forget what it's called. Super exotic wood, and that kind of scares me too. So if you stick with these 5 or 6, briar, arbutus, meerschaum, what else do we talk about? Bog oak, morta, catlinite, and olive wood, you're gonna be fine. Those are the most common. So that's what I can tell you. I could go into depth more on briar, but I think that's about it. You know, there's if you have any questions, I can do a separate video just on briar. But you know, the biggest things with briar are going to be your porosity, and then other things come into play with, you know, the quality of the pipe. It's going to be the mechanics. You know, how did the person drill it? Are there hang-ups? Is there turbulence? There's so many variables. It's hard to dial in a formula, and that's why there's so much diversity in this community. There's some guys that are known for their stems. There's guys that are known for the buttons on their stems. So no one's wrong, you know. I guess some people are wrong, but you don't know it until you smoke the pipes, or if they have a bad reputation. But you know, I guess my opinion on the upgrading your pipe or upgrading your experience is, if you're a cob guy, try a briar. If you don't like a briar, don't. You know, buy a Bones, 39 bucks. Won't break the bank. You can test out a briar, see if you like it, and if you don't, cobs aren't bad. I love cobs, you know. And if you're in the factory zone with your pipes, you're buying Petersons, Savinellis, Dagner pipes, Blackjacks, what have you, save up some money if you can. You know, I know not everyone can afford a handmade pipe, but if you can, you know, make it a birthday present or a Christmas present, and you know, try it out. I think everyone should at least have 1 or 2 handmade pipes in their collection. it's a different experience, and in some cases, it's a different relationship you have with the tobacco. It blooms things, you know, and even further than that, you might even get to have a relationship with the maker, which is really cool. I love talking to, you know, my colleagues, fellow craftsmen, and trading pipes with them, and that's what this is all about. It's a brotherhood. It's about, you know, having friends, even though they're not tangibly here. You know, I can still have a beer with a guy in Australia. I like that. I mean, it's easier, right? So anyway, there you have it. That's your pipe making materials. I hope I answered the question. Um, I hope you're all doing well. I'm gonna do another video after this to just kind of update you guys on what I'm doing. I've been kind of scarce lately, been real busy, but I've got some time in the shop. I've got about half a pipe to finish, so um, I'll do another video. Sorry for the length. If it was easier to talk about or quicker to talk about, I would, but it's a lengthy topic. So anyway, hope everyone's doing well, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.